Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 49. So God has delivered Israel and his family from the famine, blessed a lot of the families of the earth through Joseph's actions, his obedience through suffering to elevation into this position of authority that God gave him. And this is a picture of the entire narrative of the Bible in one book. However, while the sons of Israel being in Egypt right now is a good thing, that doesn't mean it's going to be in the future. The current generation is saved, delivered, brought out of certain death through Joseph and into the land of Egypt. But the land of Egypt is going to create oppression and tyranny for the sons of Israel going forward after this generation. That's why Joseph is just a forerunner of a Messiah to come. In addition to that, we remember that God has called the sons of Israel to inherit Canaan and that land, and they can't exactly do that if they're living in Egypt. So with all that being said, God's ultimate plan for redemption is far from over. Even though we have this really good story in this book, we've still got 65 books of the Bible left to go. Now the rest of the Bible is going to follow the offspring of the characters we meet in this story. And this chapter specifically, Genesis 49, is going to give us some sort of prophecies. It happens through Israel giving one final blessing and kind of prophesying over each of his 12 sons. And it outlines the 12 tribes of Israel as we'll understand them throughout the rest of the biblical narrative. So let's go ahead and break it down. Genesis chapter 49. Then Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves, that I may tell you what will befall you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father." So Jacob gathers all of his sons together one last time before he dies. So Jacob is going to bless each of his sons kind of in their own way and give them an inheritance in the land of Canaan that their descendants will inherit. And he's going to kind of prophesy about the nature of the tribe that's going to come forth from each of them. And these prophecies kind of give each tribe their own identity. It's almost like banners and sigils and house words in something like Game of Thrones. When you read about a specific character in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you can kind of guess what they're going to act like, how they're going to behave based on what tribe they're from. And this specific chapter in the Bible, Genesis 49, along with other chapters like 1 Chronicles 2 through 8 and chapter 12 and Judges 5, also give descriptions of the 12 tribes of Israel and kind of what each one is about. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence. Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. So Reuben, he is the oldest, he's the strongest, he's the most dignified, as firstborn sons were expected to be back then. But his descendants won't bear that firstborn responsibility because of Reuben's recklessness. Jacob reminds us of how he slept with Bilhah, which was one of his father's wives, right, in an attempt to usurp his father's position. So the tribe of Reuben is actually going to settle outside of Canaan on the other side of the Jordan River. And they're a really powerful force that sometimes helps the rest of Israel, like in Joshua 1, and is sometimes wants to stay out of Israelite affairs, like in Judges chapter 5. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. Because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So Simeon and Levi get lumped together because of how they massacred all the men in Shechem in chapter 34. They're rebuked for their murderous ways, and Jacob says that they're not going to inherit one specific piece of land in Canaan. Instead, they're going to be scattered throughout the whole land, which actually comes true for both tribes. Simeon becomes this small little nomadic tribe inside the larger land area that Judah possesses. They're always migrating around, according to 1 Chronicles 4. Meanwhile, Levi is spread out all across the land because they actually become the priests that the Israelites go to. They're going to be experts on God's religious Levitical law, right? It's actually named after the Levites. It was the priest's job to intercede for the people, to offer sacrifices on their behalf, and kind of represent the people to God. Even the Levites that weren't priests normally took care of the temple and things like that. So God uses their scattering for his good. He redeems the tribe of Levi from this angry, murderous sect and scatters them as punishment for that, but that allows them to influence the rest of Israel for good, supposedly. Of course, just because someone is a Levite or just because someone is a priest doesn't mean they do a great job at that responsibility, right? The Bible is also full of priests who screw up in really bad ways and that are corrupt, right? So like Simeon and like Reuben, Levi has its ups and downs too. Judah, your brothers shall praise you, and your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine, and his teeth are white from milk. Judah was the son who sinned against Tamar, but he repented and confessed of that sin. And he's going to become royalty. The royal line is going to come from Judah. He's going to become a rich and powerful tribe that is praised by the rest of Israel. King David comes from the line of Judah, as do all of his descendants who sit the throne. And Judah actually has the largest area of landmass of any of the 12 tribes of Israel. In fact, the descendants of Israel, even all the way up until today, call themselves Jews. It's related back to the name Judah. And most importantly, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, also comes from this line. Zebulun will dwell at the seashore, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be toward Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens, and became a slave at forced labor. And so next up is Zebulun and Issachar. Now if you remember, that's not actually how the birth order goes. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher are all older than Zebulun and Issachar, but you also remember Zebulun and Issachar are children of Leah, which is why they're grouped together with Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Zebulun will be by the sea. Now the land they settle becomes a big part of Galilee, which is where Jesus began his ministry near its now famous sea. Issachar is a hard worker, and he settles in the fertile valley of Jezreel, and the land of Issachar actually includes Nazareth, Jesus' hometown. The descendants of Zebulun and Issachar are both pretty acclaimed in Israel, both in Deborah's song in Judges 5 and in 1 Chronicles 12. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backwards. For your salvation I wait, O Lord. So Dan is prophesied to be this judge that eventually turns into a serpent. And the best example of this is someone like Samson, who is from the line of Dan. If you remember his story, he is one of the judges. He's called to make good decisions among the people and bring order to Israel. But his life ends up being characterized more by sex and lust and deception and pride, and he ends up misleading his people, right? He becomes like the serpent that came to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The tribe of Dan is also linked to idolatry in 1 Kings 12 and Amos 8. As for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. So Gad is a tribe that is in this vulnerable position, but they're also strong enough to fight back. And this comes true. Like Reuben, they settle on the other side of the Jordan River outside of Canaan. So they're in a very vulnerable position in opposition to the rest of Israel's neighbors, right? But also, 1 Chronicles 12 calls them very brave warriors. As for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal dainties. Asher is going to settle in the northern part of Canaan on the coast of the Mediterranean. And so that's going to be land that's filled with oil and olives, right? It's going to be a land of rich foods and royal pleasures. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. Naphtali is going to settle in this northern hill country of Galilee and live in the hills like a deer. Like Zebulun and Issachar, they are also praised for their courage and bravery and support in 1 Chronicles 12 and in Deborah's song in Judges 5. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him. But his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, from the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lie beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors, up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So all this fruitfulness, abundance, increasing, should be readily apparent and obvious from the story we know about Joseph and his family, even right now. How he was bitterly attacked but overcame it and still was fruitful in the midst of it. We know that that abundance, that increasing, represents how Joseph is split into two tribes, into Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, Manasseh is actually going to have the second largest land area territory in Israel. It's only behind Judah. But it's also going to be split in half by the Jordan River. Half is going to settle on one side in Canaan, and half is going to settle on the other side outside of Canaan. And so they're never really this huge powerhouse that anyone has to deal with. Meanwhile, we know that Ephraim is going to become more populous and more important than his older brother Manasseh because all of the northern kings of Israel come from Ephraim's line. Now, if you know anything about 1st and 2nd Kings, you know that the northern kings of Israel are not always what they're cracked up to be. So that's not necessarily a good thing. But other people that come from the tribe of Ephraim include people like Joshua, Deborah, Samuel, these really brave and courageous figures that follow God's will. So again, Ephraim, like a lot of the rest of the sons of Israel, is a mixed bag. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoil. Finally, you have Benjamin, who settles just north of Jerusalem, kind of in between Judah and Ephraim. And so as a result, they're always involved in the Israelite politics going forward. There's a civil war against the tribe of Benjamin in Judges chapter 20. You also have people like King Saul that are from that line, so that kind of leads to the ravenous wolf part. But you also have people like Jeremiah, Mordecai, and the Apostle Paul that come from the line of Benjamin. So that is kind of the treasure spoil part of it. Again, mixed bag. There's some good guys, some bad guys. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one with the blessing appropriate to him. Then he charged them and said to them, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought, along with the field from Ephron the Hittite for a burial site. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah, and they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it purchased from the sons of Heth. When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. So we've spent this whole time talking about all these descendants and what's going to happen, but all of that is in the way far future. Right now, Jacob dies, and he dies surrounded by his 12 sons at the end of a long life that was filled with ups and downs, but an ultimate faithfulness in God's will. He commands his sons to bring him back and bury him in the land of Canaan, in that cave that Abraham bought for Sarah all the way back in chapter 23. And we hear that was the place that Sarah and Abraham are buried, Isaac and Rebekah are buried, and it's where Leah is buried too. So in summary, this chapter serves to give identity to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And each tribe has its high points in the prophecy and its low points in the prophecy too. And so just like all the mixed bags of characters that we've seen come through Genesis so far, we're being set up to see that that's going to be the norm, right? There are going to be a lot of people with really high highs and really low lows in the books going forward. And it makes sense, because no one person is more or less special, more or less chosen by God, more or less righteous than anyone else because of their family background or the land they live in. But nevertheless, the unity of a culture or a tribe or a nation or a family is built around what they have in common and what they all believe to be true. So for the kingdom of God to be united, we need to all hold together on what we believe to be true, on what we have in common, which is Jesus Christ. The church of Jesus is called a kingdom just like these tribes, right? But the difference is that the kingdom of God is open to anyone, regardless of nationality, family background. As these tribes of Israel find their identity in these chapters, we, as the Church of Jesus, should find identity in Him, right? Individually and corporately. I hope that inspires you today. This has been 1189. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a good day. God bless.